Hi, you're watching Investor Insights, and in this video I'd like to talk to you a little bit about statistics. I'm a mathematician, and my two biggest strengths of all things are statistics and probabilities. So when it comes to talking about the subject of statistic and statistical analysis, I'm the man. Now, what does this really have to do with investing or any insights? Well, I'd like to talk to you about the manipulation of statistics, and more importantly, how any story can be told using numbers. And this is going to lead to how all the GDP numbers that you are given by the government, or the CPI numbers, are just all lies. And they're all lies because the methodology by which they're obtained, or just the straight out numbers, are just false. So let me elaborate on this. First things first, statistical analysis deals a lot with overall samples and sample size. So if I was to get a real correct picture of anything, the most accurate way to do it is to get a sample size that comprises everybody. Now, the government does that in a census. Like, you got to work out exactly what your population is, what the age demographics is, or the income demographics, and so forth. Every 7 years they do a survey. They get everybody to fill in a form, and it's compulsory. Without doing this census, the government can't make plans for future development and deployment of capital towards whatever township or city where they see most growth. The rest goes on. But I'm more looking at how you can manipulate the data and the sample size to get whatever story that you want to be told. So, as I said before, the most accurate picture that you can get out of any sample size is by taking the entire population, the entire sample. But to do that, it's a very costly, time-consuming, and very laborious activity. You just want to take a correct sample out of the population, and that should give you a general overall view of what the population is like. So if you look at, for example, if I was asked what percentage of the population likes drinking Coke. Now, the best way to do this is to go out there and to randomly pick say 10,000 people and just ask them straight out, do you like drinking Coke? And even that task is not a simple one, because a lot of factors influence where I get this sample from. If I walked into public schools and got 10,000 students and asked them who liked Coke, man, I'm going to get a 95% positive answer. But if I walk into all nursing homes and ask how many of them like drinking Coke, I'd probably get a 2% positive answer. Unless, of course, there's a whole bunch of hyped up grannies who just enjoy drinking Coke, but that's a story for another day. So you can manipulate the data that you get simply by manipulating the sample from which you take the data from. A second way that you can manipulate the statistics is the actual size of the sample itself. So if you wanted to be lazy and get a real fudged up number, you just have a small sample, or I should say a smaller sample to play with. So again, I can use the example of, do you enjoy drinking Coke? I just rock up to 20 high school kids and my response rate will be probably 95%. I only asked 20 people, 19 of them are going to say yes. And conversely, I can go into a nursing home and ask the same question and only get a 5% yes positive rate. So manipulation is not hard, and manipulation through just a little adjustment of the sample size and the sample itself, I can tell you a different story. So it is true when you hear that numbers can just be manipulated. And this is just very simple, very elegant way of just fudging numbers. If you wish to look at, for example, the way that the government even reports the statistics, they use just little tiny details. They use even just the methodology by which they report the numbers to you shows that these guys don't want you to hear the whole truth. Right? Take a look at, for example, the way that they report CPI. Now, the government wants CPI, or especially people like the Fed want the CPI to be as low as possible. So what they do is they give you the CPI for the quarter or for the month. Whatever it is, they try and pick the smallest time frame that is available in which they can say that the CPI is for. So if they talk about CPI, normally it's for the quarter, so they may say that CPI is 0.6% for the last quarter. That's what the Australian Bureau of Statistics said that CPI was anyway. Absolute joke. But by saying things for the quarter, the number of course is going to sound small. Because if you got a big number for the quarter, it's a disaster anyway. But if you've got just an average number and you just talk about it for the quarter, of course it's going to sound small. But then you take a look at GDP, and they never talk about GDP for the quarter. They always annualize it. Because when you annualize something, the number is going to be bigger. So in reporting GDP, for example, the GDP, for example, last quarter in America was 1.7%. But that is an annualized number. So it's 4 times bigger than what the number is for the quarter. But as I said, they don't want to tell you what the quarter number is. They annualize it. Sounds much bigger, makes everybody happier. And then you've got the actual way that they calculate those numbers. Take a look at CPI. As I said before, the best way to calculate any statistical average or statistical analysis is to take the whole sample size. So in theory, to get a correct CPI number, you should be taking from the entire basket of goods and services that's out there and work out how much each of them have risen and just tabulate all your numbers to give you an overall number. But no, that's not going to work out because they're going to see that everything's going up, so that's not good enough. They don't want CPI to be high. What do? Basically, whatever is in there which has gone up in price too much, they say it's an outlier. that means it's a number that's way outside the norm, so they're just going to chuck it out. If the number is even slightly above normal, they're going to say, look, you know what, it's bordering on outline, we'll just chuck them out as well. But all the little numbers that are either just on the positive side of flatlining or even negative, they're going to take all of them into account, and that's how they calculate a very tiny number, so as to justify more loose monetary policy. Now, when it comes to GDP, anything that's really low, they chuck out. But anything that's big, man, they're going to put more weighting on them. And in fact, when it comes to GDP, it's not about chucking things out, it's throwing things in. So things that were never calculated into GDP before, they want now. Why? Because if something wasn't in there before and you add it in, what's that going to make your number look like compared to the previous one? It's going to be bigger. And the more obscure, the more blatant things that you wish to add into GDP, the more bigger it's going to be. And that's the only way that America is showing all this growth. Because, as you know, GDP is consumption as well as government spending. So anything that's out there which is a measure of consumption or government spending, as trivially as it may be, or not even relating to either of them, they're just going to chuck it in just to make the number look bigger. What does this mean to the investor? It means one simple thing. Don't trust government numbers. Anything from the public sector, I don't give a rat's if it comes from China, whose numbers are blatantly fudged anyway, to the American policymakers, they're just as bad. But because they're perceived to be a free capital market, which they're not, they're judged to be legitimate. But they're only as legitimate as me telling you that I can prove to you that 95%, or the hell with it, I can prove to you that 100% of people out there love Coke. Sorry, I actually don't work for Coke, but this is just an example. And I can do that in very easy, simple ways. So don't be fooled by statistics. This is a very important lesson. Any number that the government throws out is probably false. And the one that you can see most is inflation. And I will always keep on coming back to this one. Inflation is one thing that you feel every day, but every time you hear it from the government, it doesn't matter if it's America or Australia or whoever, the claims are the CPI is small. But yet you always seem to be running short on money when it comes to paying for things. It's not because you're being robbed, it's because things are going up. And they're going up at a rampant pace. And nobody wants to admit to that. So next time you hear a data release, it doesn't matter, an economic data release, it doesn't matter where it comes from, you can be assured of one thing. If it's CPI or GDP, it's going to be a whole load of bull dust.